Hello again, friends. You may have heard that Adventism has had another leader depart from the little flock of the Adventist fold. Pastor Ryan Day, a prominent figure on the Three Angels Broadcasting Network, announced last month that he was no longer employed with the Adventist denomination. On his new YouTube channel, Rethink Adventism, Ryan explains the reasons that led to his departure from the Adventist faith. Since then, all kinds of videos have sprung up speculating as to what led to his exodus. But per Ryan's own accounting of his departure, it would appear that his reasons for leaving are quite typical of those that abandon Seventh-day Adventism. Problems with the investigative judgment, the authority and authenticity of prophetess Ellen White, and the doublespeak regarding Adventism's adherence to sola scriptura. What has been a little unusual is the awkward vitriol knee-jerk reaction to Ryan's departure from other Seventh-day Adventist leaders. Reactions which are perhaps a little telling of Adventism's deep insecurity when fellow leaders question any aspect of the SDA faith and decide in good conscience that they can no longer promote such doctrines. Let's take a look at some of the comments that have been said recently about Ryan Day.
But I want to say today that Ryan Day leaving the SDA movement is cockroach poison and wag the dog. We're living in a time, my friends, wherein damnable heresies within the SDA movement is preparing SDAs to encounter the final shaking and the final sifting out. Don't sympathize with apostate leaders, apostate preachers, those who have fallen away from present truth.
And of course, we all know that present truth is code word for the doctrines unique to Seventh-day Adventism. It's worth explaining what Andrew Henriquez means by cockroach poison. Like the poison often used in cockroach abatement, the exposed cockroach brings this deadly toxin back to the nest, where it eventually kills other cockroaches. In the case of Ryan Day, he was exposed to the poison well of doctrinal positions that Alan Davis and others had also ingested earlier. All Ryan had to do was to look at some of the videos that have been produced lately by former Adventists that challenge Adventist doctrines. Of course, there's a little more going on here than mere exposure to concepts that cause doubt. Ryan Day has the ability to think critically in his search for truth, and he was willing to overturn every rock of doctrine and examine it from all angles. This is something that many caught in the authoritarian grip of a sectarian mindset often refuse to do, or perhaps, more than likely, they are simply afraid to examine due to some irrational fear of losing their denominational identity. Now, many Adventists have left the denomination over the years, and some of them make a larger splash of impact than others when they leave, but soon whatever waves were made in the initial departure soon disperse as more and more time goes by. This may very well be the case with Ryan Day as well, but what makes him a little different is that he has global recognition due to his presence on television media, such as 3ABN. Allow me to share a little bit from a recent article from Spectrum magazine that highlights the significance of Ryan's departure on a global scale. Author Stanton Witherspoon writes, "For many American Adventists, Day's decision to leave was seen through the lens of individual spirituality, a man wrestling with his conscience, navigating his own theological journey. But across the Atlantic and Africa, the shockwaves hit differently. The narrative around Day's departure was not just personal, it was communal, it was prophetic. Among African Adventists, many quickly ascribed to it eschatological significance. The shaking has begun. For them, Day's departure denotes the end-time crisis that will separate the faithful from the unfaithful. With Africa now comprising nearly half, 46%, of Adventism's 23 million members worldwide, what happens to faith in Africa, how it is shaped, nurtured, or shaken, will inevitably define the future of global Adventism. To understand why Day's exit is such a heavy blow in Africa, one must first grasp the weight of American and Western Adventism on African religious consciousness. Since the early 20th century, Western missionaries from the U.S., Europe, and Australia planted Adventist churches across Africa. With them came the theological frameworks institutional structures, and cultural assumptions of their home countries. More than just gospel truths, they brought organizational models, health reform principles, education systems, and worship styles deeply rooted in Western norms. Organizations like Amazing Facts and 3ABN were not peripheral ministries. They became pillars. In Liberia, Ghana, Kenya, and much of East and West Africa, their TV programs, printed literature, and evangelistic campaigns often formed the very foundation of Adventist identity. For many African Adventists, trusting these voices was synonymous with trusting God. Thus, when a figure like Day, who was trained by Amazing Facts, nurtured in the Adventist media ecosystem, and showcased as a model evangelist, publicly disavows the denomination, it strikes at the heart of that trust. African religiosity is distinctively communal. The idea of we is always greater than I. Whether in Christianity, Islam, or indigenous religions, loyalty to family, church, tribe, and spiritual elders is a deeply ingrained value. Thus, religious figures are rarely seen as individuals merely expressing personal views. They are perceived as custodians of truth and protectors of the communal faith. Their actions carry collective meaning. When Day declared that he could no longer reconcile Adventist theology with his understanding of Scripture, many African Adventists did not interpret this as a mere personal journey. They interpreted it as betrayal, or worse, a signal of looming spiritual crisis. This emotional response is not accidental. It is a reflection of how African Adventists have, for decades, merged loyalty to faith with loyalty to leadership figures, especially those from America who are viewed as pioneers or torchbearers of Adventism. While American Adventists might analyze Day's claims theologically, many African Adventists responded existentially. If a trusted Western evangelist could reach such conclusions, what does that mean for the stability of the Church's teachings? Comments circulating on WhatsApp groups and Facebook pages across Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, and Liberia echo deep concern. If Amazing Facts' own evangelist is leaving, what about the rest of us? The shaking has started. Who will stand? America is falling into apostasy, and we must hold fast to the old paths. For many, Day's exit is not just a story of one man. It is interpreted as part of a larger, cosmic battle for the soul of the Adventist Church, with Africa now positioned as the faithful remnant. I hope this article by Stan Witherspoon gives you a big picture view of the type of impact that occurs when prominent individuals leave the Adventist faith. Witherspoon goes on to suggest that maybe the departure of Ryan Day will result in a new day for Adventism, where the faithful remnant in other parts of the world will take the lead and bring Adventism out of her crisis mode. Perhaps the African continent will become less dependent on and less influenced by the West, and can carry the Adventist banner in a more faithful fashion, driven by a people who aren't given to the skepticism that plagues the Western world of Adventism. Of course, anything is possible, but what if organizational independence is not the reality that will occur? What if things snowball further due to departures of such notable leaders as Dr. Alan Davis and Ryan Day? Maybe what we have just witnessed in all this internet turmoil is actually a harbinger of sorts for what lies ahead for the Seventh-day Adventist denomination. Could it be that we have just witnessed an increasing pattern of disillusionment that we might call the Ryan Day effect, in which the bad news of independent thinking travels faster and gets more attention than what SDA leadership would care to see or witness, let alone control?